very grateful for being given this opportunity. And having listened to the fantastic opening talks that we had, I'm even more excited because I do truly believe that what I'm going to present to you, which is the culmination of probably 35 years of inquiry, conversation, practice, learning from people across the world, to say, what is going on here? Why are we making decisions that are misaligned with our best interest? What might the solutions be? And how can we put them into practice? And about 7 years ago, I reached saturation point. And what I'll be presenting to you is that. And I believe, and I hope you do too, it is the response to the questions that were posed in our opening speeches. And the answer is governance. So, we know, and as was really well outlined in the opening sessions, there is a lot going on, and it's speeding up. And it will continue, and it will get worse, and it will distract us more if we don't focus on the systemic decision-making systems that underpin those crises. And to do that, we need to get some foundations. We're very, very good as humans at exceptionalizing. You just have to walk into a university. What we're not good at is noticing what unites us, what's clear, what's so self-evident that we don't give it a name. But we need to give these things names and do that now. And we need to start with the economy, because it isn't just a thing over there. It is what we are all doing. It is our system of transformation of resources in order to make our lives better. That's what we buy into. It is a tool of government delegated by citizens to work on our behalf. So what is well-being then? If well-being is the point of an economy, our well-being, what is it? Well, we could say, and this is a mishmash of, it's the perennial question that we'll never have an answer to, it's subjective, we'll go into that maybe later, but a positive state of being where current and future needs are met such that there is a capacity and opportunity to flourish. And then let's look at sustainable development, the Brundtland Report, which was about the economy and was about all of the systemic issues that we're talking about today. Development that meets the needs, well-being, as we said, needs underpin well-being, of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It took me 20 years of inquiry every single day to realize that there is something staring us in the face, that until we can name it, we cannot move forward, which is that the value generation objective that sits behind all of this is long-term well-being for all. We focus on the pillars of sustainability, but we forgot what the pillars are supporting. And in all of these are that, it's well-being. Not any old thing. Yes, we need to debate what it is. It is not for some people, it's for everybody. Yes, we need to keep debating who everybody is. And it is not just now, it's in the future. And let's not not Elon Musk and Trump decide what long-term means before we've had a chance to decide whether we're a stepping stone to cyborg reality or this is what we're invested in on planet Earth. And if there was any doubt that this was the elephant in the room, so to speak, let's look at the mandate of government. Public Sector Accounting Standards Board very boldly and clearly says that the mandate of all governments is to enhance and maintain well-being of all entities and citizens. And if you look in the UK, local government is incorporated, so they are companies, they have directors, and their powers, and they have powers to take laws out of the way that stand in the way of this, is the well-being of populations. So long-term well-being for all. What we're rapidly losing, what we need to make happen, and what, if we look at it, is potentially the closest we might get to humanity's meta-purpose. If you ask enough why is something good, why is it valuable, I can almost guarantee you, you will get to those three things. So if the object of the economy, which takes our resources and transforms them, is the very same thing as sustainable development, we should be living in the most fantastic world. We've supercharged our economy, we've sped it up. So why is the opposite the reality? Where did we go wrong so fast? And ladies and gentlemen, and excellencies, I believe I need to say, I believe the answer lies in governance. So we have to step back 1 second and say, well, what the impacts that we have on long-term well-being for all, where do they come from? Well, they ultimately come from decisions that are made The most powerful decisions that are made in organizations where groups of people come together to make decisions as one entity. And within those, the most powerful decisions are those that are routinely made. We all make random decisions, but those that are routinely made. And then we have to remember that governance is the function that directs, oversees, and is accountable for routine decisions in organizations. That is what governance is. And when I say organizations, I mean any time that more than one person comes together. I mean, we're an organization, we're an organism, but we're talking about formalized, because once you formalize, you have to formalize that governance, even if it's two people coming together saying, hey, let's do something. And then let's think about culture. So we say culture eats strategy for breakfast, but culture is an emergent property from routine decisions and the way that things are done around here, and what is rewarded and what isn't rewarded. So governance is the most powerful shaper of routine decisions, impacts, and culture. So if we want to fix a problem with humanity's decision-making, we cannot do that if we don't do it through governance. And so helpfully, and this is part of the long journey to get here, is that I had the privilege of leading this process with my colleague from Trinidad and Tobago, Axel Kravatsky. It took 5 years. It's the first time we've ever had a global standard on governance of organizations. Governance, a topic that goes back to Plato, but which has been formalized as a discipline and professionalized within the very era of an economy that is forcing us into making wrong, bad, anti-well-being decisions. So until we could talk about governance in a way applicable to all organizations, including government, that was not co-opted by the very problem, we were stuck. So thank goodness, and I hope you're happy to know we have this standard. Not enough people know about it. So what did it say? The definition of governance in that standard: a human-based system which is directed, overseen, and held accountable for achieving its defined purpose. So you can see here that oversight and accountability are of direction. So you cannot have governance. You can't have oversight, you can't have accountability without being clear about what your direction is. And this is where we get to the heart of decision making, not just of organizations, but us as organisms, because governance is a foundational topic that is applicable at all levels. So let's just think about decision making of the largest organization you can imagine, or a decision you make up when you get up in the morning. They are structured in the same way. The question is, what are you trying to achieve? What is the maximizing goal? But what are the parameters that that goal is taken within? There will always be parameters. Some are put upon us. Some we encounter in the moment. But some, like our values, for example, we choose. We also choose whether to obey the law, which are parameters that are put on us. And why this matters is because decisions sit within this frame. In other words, any conversation about strategy or approach sits within what in essence is the policy, the direction, the thing that says this is what we're trying to achieve within these parameters. Now, strategy then says, given all the options we have and the context we face, what is the best way forward? Now, in an increasingly chaotic world, that strategy needs to be as adaptable, as fast-moving as possible. The problem we have is we're spending all our time debating strategy, thinking either we agree when we don't, or we disagree when we don't, because we are not clear about what our goal is and what our parameters are when we make a decision. So, by setting out the foundations of what governance is, and that fundamental literacy, I believe, is absolutely critical for us in a very practical way to be manifesting across the world, or we cannot move forward. But now the question is, how does that help us explain why we're in the mess we're in and how we can move forward? So this is an adapted Daly triangle. Herman Daly, the father of ecological economics, Donella Meadows adapted this. I further adapted it, but I checked in with Herman. Unfortunately, just before he died, he was very happy with the direction it was going in, which makes me happy. But the important thing to say is that this doesn't just describe why we're in an unsustainable economy, but why we're in an unsustainable world. And it's about all levels, from the individual up to the biggest level. Because what we have done in the pursuit of long-term well-being for all, we've created an economy that, a global economy, no matter where you are you are subject to the governance of that economy, that is focused on financial income as the maximizing goal and stocks and flows of financial capital as the means to achieve that goal. And they're not the same thing. Profitability or financial income or GDP as a goal that you are maximizing is not the same as do I have enough stocks and flows of financial capital to do that. But we have done both these things, and we've done it, and the reason we buy into it, because we've moralized it as being the best way that we could possibly make decisions so that our well-being is optimized. So we have moralized a narrow decision-making frame that means ultimately that a decision is likely to be made if it increases short-term financial self-interest of that entity, and I'm not just talking about business here, I'm talking about all entities, and it is likely to be irrational and put outside the box if it does not fulfill this criteria. So this short-term self-interest, which we do in the name of purpose, means that the real innovation goal, long-term well-being for all people and planet, that is off limits. So all the innovation that we know could happen is just not even in the decision-making room. And we know that everything that sits under the financial capital that we're so studiously counting the stocks and flows of, the non-financial capitals are not being counted. The health of the stakeholders is not being counted, and the health of the social and environmental systems that sit right at the bottom, the mental health, the social trust, the climate, the soil. We are not counting, costing, incorporating, therefore, into the parameters of our decision making, which we then oversee and account for. Now, the best that we have done is what I would call logic 2, in order to try to address, because what happens when you are in this system, of course, is that when the problems of this, okay, if you take this and you supercharge it for 100 years and maximize the size of it, obviously you're going to end up in an unsustainable world. I think this is just the obvious logic of this system. And so when those problems hit, and why we are stuck and why 30 years later all the markers are going in the wrong direction still, is because the only thing you can do is act if there is a case for short-term self-interest. If there isn't, you can't do it. If GDP won't go up, where's the case for it? If you're not going to make money from it, why would you do it? If it's not going to support your survival, you shouldn't do it. And so you end up with CSR, smorgasbord of activity that makes no sense except it's self-preservation. Logic 2, after the financial crisis most potently, but also as our major response to these issues, is not to question all the assumptions which mean that we think finance is a proxy for well-being. And there are a whole series of assumptions around our rationality, the way the market works, competition. I don't have any time to go into all of those, but they're all in the book. The point is that we don't question those. We keep the maximizing goal as saying, yes, our self-interest is the most important thing, but we now start to become enlightened and realize that if we want to be around for anything but the short term, we're going to have to start doing things like putting net zero as a parameter to our decision making. So when we do whatever we do, we can't step outside of a certain parameters of emissions. But of course, this enlightenment, which broadens the sphere, which means we have things like stakeholderism, because suddenly you have a business case, an investment case that says, oh, we can do this decision because it's important that the health of our stakeholders is kept up. Oh, we can do this because it means that we're going to be within climate change boundaries. So you have a rationale because you've extended the parameters of your decision making. But the innovative goal is still off limits. Now this you might recognize as mostly the SDGs, mostly the planetary boundary works, donor economics, and ESG. Because this is what are the limits that we want to protect? What, in other words, is the do no harm agenda. So what in effect we're saying, we are so scared of questioning the fundamental logic of the decision making that what we do is we go where we're comfortable, but is still very uncomfortable, which is to say, well, let's at least try and stem the harm. Let's take our precious degraded resources, organizations, you can have access to them, just don't harm them. That's the best that we're doing, and we're doing this very badly. We're doing ad hoc. We're not addressing all the issues at once, even though the time is utterly against us. And because this makes no sense if you're in logic 1, we get the pushback. Because this isn't irrational. If you're in logic 1 and you're looking at your short-term self-interest, why? You have no business case for this. So for all the great work of the UN and the EU institutions, we're putting a different logic onto a system that doesn't understand it and is not governed for it. And that brings us to purpose, because as I hope you can see, logically, the next step is that you get rid of the assumptions that we know don't work. You don't say, we're going to create an economy, we're going to be a university, an organization, a government that's going to create well-being for all citizens, but what we're going to do is actually just make everybody money so they have money in their pocket to buy their well-being in the marketplace. We're not going to measure whether well-being's gone up or not. That's just an emergent property from this wonderful system that doesn't work. Instead, what purpose does is it leapfrogs that and says our reason to exist is an optimal strategic contribution to the long-term well-being of all people and planet. It's not enough just to do no harm. That is not an innovation agenda. It never has been. And our organizations, of all types, are what we rely on as humanity to innovate. And we have never had an innovation crisis like we have now. So if we accept that, then we accept all organizations should be purpose-driven, starting with government, but all organizations. Why would we want an organization that isn't doing its best job for everyone with the resources that we allow it to have? But obviously, whereas in logic 2, you would protect the foundational resources because you're trying to protect your survival and ability to enhance your self-interest in the long term. If you're purpose-driven and you exist to support long-term well-being for all people and planet, then obviously you don't want to destroy it in the process. And so there is a rationale for having these parameters that takes you beyond compliance, because a culture of purpose would understand why it's important to operate within the boundaries of healthy climate, soil, mental health. And so you expand the strategy, and this is the key point. This is where we get the innovation, and this is why we see purpose-driven organizations as those that blow out of the water in terms of innovation, productivity, lack of stress, talent acquisition. And that is also because purpose unleashes humanity. Logic 1 and all the assumptions of neoliberal, neoclassical economics says values and humanity are irrelevant. You are there to make as much money as possible or the survival of the entity. Humanity gets in the way of that. A purpose-driven organization says come back into the room, but not just willy-nilly, not just to do good, not just to maximize value for all stakeholders at an entity level. That's the ultimate thing. No, to be very clear, this is who we're maximizing value for in this way, and while we do it, we will protect the well-being of everyone in the process. This is the British standard in purpose-driven organizations. I was technical author for that standard. And because we had a standard in governance, ISO 37000, we could write the very first answer to humanity's ultimate question. And I say that boldly, but I say that with confidence because I believe it's true. The answer is not a product, a service. It is a system of routinely making decisions that drives and does not destroy long-term well-being for all, like nature does without having to think about it like we would have done before we became conscious, so that we could consciously choose a system that would destroy us. And here we are with our toes over the edge of the cliff with a choice point. And we've been grappling for it. But I believe that this is the answer to that question ultimately, because that British standard in purpose-driven organizations went out for 3-month vote, passed unanimously, and we are about 1.5 years into the process of creating the world's first international standard in purpose-driven governance, purpose-driven organizations. This is the specification for the governance system that drives and protects long-term well-being for all, that is co-owned. It's not owned by a company, not owned by a person, not even within the politicized UN process, but the ISO process that has enough democratic credibility because 174 countries support their national standards body at various levels of arm's length. plus liaison bodies. It is not perfect. ISO is not perfect, but it is the best mechanism we have to be able to create, co-create, recreate our specification that we can apply, actually also the principles to ourselves, but that everyone can take and say, are you purpose-driven in relation to this? My community group, my university, my government, UN, that we can use to judge ourselves and others in a positive way. And ultimately, it is the operationalizing of love. Fear and love are the two base emotions, and they're an opposite. We have created a system based on self-interest and therefore fear, in the hope that those powerful emotions will somehow result in long-term well-being for all. We know now, without a shadow of a doubt, they're doing the opposite. So let's choose to operationalize love and bring out the best in ourselves as often as possible. We're fallible humans, but we put governance in to stop ourselves being the worst of ourselves. For some, this is going to be welcome. For others, they might have to fake it till they make it. But nonetheless, I think if we can unite the energy that exists in the system behind this, I do think that that is our chance to actually change things, our peaceful revolution. Thank you. Just briefly to say, there's some resources on the slides which you might get, and also this is another graph you can use. Thank you.